my son was very tall. He was like 6'5", and he used to have this stance where he would fold his arms and kind of put his hands up in his armpit, so a real high arms crossed. And then he kind of leaned back on one hip and he kind of looked down at you because he was always, so tall when he was like really listening. And I had gone with my husband one time and I was super laid back, and my husband was kind of the heavy. He was the one, he's more old school and really tried to be structured. So he was really carrying a lot of like, God, I love that kid so much. I wish he knew, and you put your hands just up in your armpits and did the entire stance, and you just, the smirk, and you're looking and you're like, he just wants you to know he knows how much you loved him. So he was just like, it's exactly what he needed.
I really believe she visited him.
He just wants you to know he knows how much you loved him.
And everybody in the room, their jaw just
knowing
dropped.
exactly what someone needs to hear.
That she called me when nobody really.
It was incredible.
And then I was like, oh my God.
There's more after this life. This is Ripple Road.
Hello and welcome to Episode 4 of Ripple Road. It's a story about me as a medium and the journey that I had to take in order to get where I'm at today. Still going on that journey, still there. That last episode, that was kind of rough for me. I'm surprised how much that stirred up. It's crazy that you think you dealt with all that, You go through all these decades and you feel like you've grown as a person, and then you go to revisit these past wounds, you scratch the surface, and there's the monster. It's like, what the hell, man? Crazy.
I thought I was crazy before I went to that reading. I was feeling Dan. I was getting messages from him. He came to me in a dream. I kept getting messages, and it's just signs that he overdosed on heroin with fentanyl. And I didn't even know that he used. So I was just like, that's part of why I thought I was going crazy too, is because I'm making this crazy shit up, And I thought I was losing my mind. My therapist told me I wasn't losing my mind. She had said that she on the side was a medium as well, and she said he was with me. And the morning that I woke up before the reading, I meditated and I told him, I was like, homie, you need to go find this guy, Scott Henry, and you need to scream your name in his ear. I have to hear from you today, because if not, I'm going to check myself into a mental hospital. And during the group reading, you read me first, but Dan didn't come through. And then you read some other people, and you stood in the middle of the room, and you were like, all right, man, I hear you. And you said, I've been hearing this name since I walked in the door today. And was like, who is Dan? And I said, that's my friend. And you said, yeah, but he's deceased. And I was like, yeah, that's my dead friend. And, you called him out by name. The first message that came through was that he didn't mean to leave and it was an accident. That confirms so much. And I do have to tell you that I finally, got up the courage to ask his sister, and she confirmed it. I needed that to heal from it and to understand more. And, it helped so much. And then just all the little stories and little things that he was telling you during that group reading. I remember you were like, why does he want me to turn upside down? What? You were trying to bend down, and you laughed, and you were like, oh, I get it. He used to like to flip you around, and he did. He was a big guy, and just would flip me on the couch, or, just because I'm little, just thought it was funny and tickle me and stuff. And you talked like him. Dan had the most distinct voice of any human being I've ever known in my lifetime. He just very deep, very stoner surfer, It was him. Without a doubt, it was him.
Where did we leave off? Man, that last one shook me up. Anyway, I guess I was still going to St. John's, living there in Paulsboro, but I'm going to move right forward with the story. After St. John's, it was 8th grade graduation. There was kind of a critical point here, changing to high school, trying to decide whether to go to Paulsboro High or to go to St. James High School, continue with the Catholic tradition, you know. St. James was a 45-minute bus ride away, and Paulsboro High was a walk about 8 blocks over, you know. But guess what I decided? St. James, woohoo! Go Spartans. So that's where we'll start off, I guess.
It was maybe my 3rd or 4th reading with you. It wasn't one of the first ones. I'd been talking to you for a couple years, but it was when I was living in Philadelphia, and it was an in-person reading, and essentially you gave me this full, long, great reading, and I was so obsessed with like what was going to happen next. You said, you know, there's this other thing here. I don't know what it means. It's probably nothing, but you know, like take it for what it is. And you're like, you're making ice cream, and you're like, yeah, it's really fresh. It's like you're literally making it, like you're putting the ingredients in the ice cream as it's coming together, and you're making ice cream. And I was just like, oh, that's super weird, and kind of just filed it away as like a peculiar kind of thing. So anyway, fast forward, I'd say maybe 2 years, I met my future husband, and this is like early OkCupid days where you'd like email back and forth. He mentioned that his parents owned an ice cream store in Georgia, and my brain kind of exploded, and I was like, come again? What? And anyway, fast forward, and we actually ended up moving to Georgia to take over that ice cream shop last year. So I'm now the owner of an ice cream store in the Atlanta area with my husband where we make ice cream fresh every day.
By sophomore year, we actually moved out of that Paulsboro house. My dad found a house to buy down in Carneys Point, New Jersey. That was a lot more rural. It was kind of like the countryside, you know. It certainly wasn't near the city, and it certainly didn't have a lot of a culture, I guess you'd say. So it was depressing to me. Like, I just felt, it's like, again, like moving to this different town, it's just away from what I know. It's further away from things that are familiar. And at 16 years old, I remember like just walking around the town at night. Like I just like walk out the front door of the house and just be like, I'm just going for a walk. I'm just going. Like, and I would just be out there for like an hour just exploring the streets in the town, and like just felt really dazed, you know, like alone, I guess you'd say.
I'd been having such a hard time, like spiritually, mentally, emotionally, about figuring out what was next. The opportunity to move south was just something that I felt like was a death of me, and that I couldn't do it. And, you know, once I did give into it, it was something that, you know, maybe there was a death of me, and maybe that did have to happen for me to keep moving forward. But anyway, we were in Ohio visiting my family, and we swung over to Pittsburgh to visit my husband's family. And on the drive back, it was like, we're driving back, it's like complete solitude, we're listening to jams, and I'm just like in my head talking to God, talking to higher power, just trying to connect and just saying, like, I need help. I don't know what to do. I know he really wants to do this, and I'm having such a hard time getting on board. Like, what do I do? And I just kind of like set it free on the highway, like let it go, and we zoomed along. And the next morning, I got a text from you out of nowhere. We had not spoken for probably like a year, like maybe more than that, a couple years even, potentially. Hey, I was meditating yesterday and I got something for you, and you need to know that you're going to be okay and everything's going to be all right, and just keep going. Like, it's all going to be taken care of. And that was all I needed. I felt like I got an intergalactic message, like I was totally heard, and it felt like just do it. And that was all I needed. And I just kind of, in my heart, made the decision that I was going to do it. It was super crazy.
So, it's good to find mentors. It's good to find some people that are the beacon bearers. They can light a path forward for you. In high school, I had an English teacher named Mr. McNulty. And if anybody out there from St. James knows this guy, give him a what's up from me. He probably inadvertently saved my life without even realizing it. So McNulty held the class with kind of an iron fist, He didn't take any guff from anybody. He'd send you into detention right away. It demanded respect. He'd swung his podium right up to the front of the classroom. The other classrooms in the high school were just cinder block, kind of cold, classrooms. He had like bookshelves and like pennants and all kinds of stuff all over the room decorated with his character. And he was a groovy cat that way, man. But, he had nicknames for everybody. He never called anybody by their name. I think it was kind of this mnemonic trick that he did to remember everyone's names over the years. I don't know if I was like Scooter or Skippy. Sometimes he would just throw things out at you, reference in the subconscious. Like if it was Skippy one day, it's Peter Pan the next because it's peanut butter brand names, or something, and you're supposed to get the joke, and it's funny. So you'd be sitting there and he would just be like, Jehoshaphat, or whatever. And it would be like, oh, that's Joe. All right, you go, But eventually his enthusiasm for literature rubbed off on me. It was the way that he presented the poems and the short stories, the way he picked them apart. I think it was his inspiration kind of became my inspiration. The way he talked about how somebody could compose a poem like overnight. How does this thing land fully formed in their head? And then they wake up and they write down an entire poem. I think he was fascinated by the concept of the muse.
When we met, it was kind of an accidental meeting. You were going to do a reading for the place I was working. Yeah, because I had to unlock it and let you in. And then I'm watching you and I'm thinking, okay, something's up. He's talking to himself now. So I just asked you what you were doing, why you were talking to yourself. And I remember asking you, and you said you were talking to your spirit guides who were helping guide you in the environment that we were going to have the reading in. And I guess let you know if that's a good space or whatever.
Like, what is that thing that inspires humans to create? He was fascinated philosophically by this, It would be like after class, all right, Henry, get over here, and here's a book for you to read. And I think the first book he ever gave me was Siddhartha, which was amazing. It's about the life of the Buddha by Hermann Hesse. And then I got into Hesse thing, I had to read Narcissus and Goldmund and Steppenwolf and all this. So at 16, 17 years old, I was starting to get into I guess what would be considered a counterculture at some point. I don't know if you'd consider it that, but hey, one time our summer reading was The Stranger, by Camus, and Metamorphosis by Kafka, which is kind of crazy for a Catholic school to throw some Kafka and Camus at the people, but that put me on a whole Kafka kick, and existentialist writings, Jean-Paul Sartre and Nietzsche and all this stuff. So I started filling my head with this stuff,
Yeah, so that was how we met. I really didn't get it, wasn't open to it. And then we did that reading. You came to my house. And after that first reading that we had, my life has never been the same.
I guess the first reading was about 2 years after I lost my mom, and it was really tough for me. It was sudden. She got a blood clot after surgery. So, she wasn't supposed to die, from that surgery, and she did. And it left us all what are we supposed to do? I was on medicine and going to see therapists, and, I was a mess. So I came to that reading at the house, and that was the first one I ever been to, and it put, calm into me. I left there and thought, okay, everything's going to be okay. And I felt so much better.
You see, I kind of felt like an outsider because of the weird bullying and just I didn't feel popular. I wasn't into sports. I think I was awkward as a kid. So by high school, dealing with that private emotional world, even though I didn't have labels for it, I didn't have a grasp on what it was depression. But to get it apart and to like kind of pick apart the details of it, I found my way into, like expression, personal expression. You have to express what's inside of you privately. The more you keep that secret, the more the devil will work on you. That's what I think evil is in the world. Evil is that which makes you feel more internal and private and less connected to the world around you, Enlightenment could be said like, instead of transcending this physical world, enlightenment is being more connected to the world around you, right? Why not? I like that story. Writing short stories, writing poems, and kind of getting that stuff out there. There would be moments where I would get a flash of something, an insight of some poem idea or short story idea, and then need to unpack it, right? So it's like it comes to you in a burst, fully formed, I mean like rhyme and meter and theme and content and wordplay. And it's like there, it's all there. But if you don't have the right, like mental tempo, it'll slide away, and it kind of trains your brain to hang in that one package, hang in that packet. Where did that muse deposit that vibe? Is that in your imagination? Is that a psychic channel? Is that like, what is that place in your head where that muse fully formed that idea? How do you hang in that spot and unpack it all? This line goes first. Oh, wait, that line that I had first, that's actually the last line. I can feel it. I can feel how that poem is forming. And this content here, that's supposed to be the shocking twist at the end. Okay, so if that's the case, I got to talk about this part of it in the first stanza, and you're unpacking, but you're hanging out in that space, in that channel of the muse.
Out of nowhere, someone told you to, I guess, tell me that my husband's book that he was having difficulty finishing, it was because it was out of order. That the beginning of his book was not the beginning. That needed to come later, and he needed to rearrange it. And over these years, traveling across the country, I've met a couple people, two in particular, that happened to be mediums. It was actually in Tennessee, and my husband was with me, and we were at dinner, and this woman reached across the table and said to him, "You need to rearrange your book. It's out of order." And it was very shortly after that he was convinced. And he rearranged that book, and now it's published.
There were times where I would go until, sunrise, dawn, and I'm still unpacking for 5-6 hours. This poem, this thing, I'm editing it down. No, that wasn't right. And I'm getting these insights and inspiration. I mean, I guess you could say it's kind of fringe lunacy, somebody that sits alone in their bedroom at like 19, 20, 21 and just sits there unpacking this like hypersensitive vibe of this poem and following it down and intuiting what it is and crafting it and editing it. And the thing about it is it's similar to how I do a reading. I go into that vibe, I go into that place in my head where I get that force, that packet, that one punch, and then I got to unpack it. Then I have to take everything out of it that was in there, but it came in a nanosecond. It came fully formed. Oh, it's a man in spirit. Oh, it's an older man in spirit. Oh, it's that person's father. It's that person's father. And they haven't been gone that long. It's less than a year. And they didn't see each other for 5 years before his passing. How did I get all of that and? It was all, bam, one thing. Hit me, quick. Because time on the other side isn't the same. And so they hit you with this one instant thing that you then have to unpackage all this stuff like a poem. It's very similar.
A very specific one. There was somebody who had come through, and they had been on my mind. I mean, it was from somebody long ago, and they were specifically on my mind. I hadn't asked you, and you had said, somebody is coming through, and their name begins with this letter. This person might have, had hurt themselves, and which they had committed suicide. You said this person was a runner, and they were. And so I never obviously told you that, but they finally had found peace. And he said he wanted to let us know, or his family know, that he appreciates that they kept his first pair of running shoes. They did. I do know that they kept his first pair of running shoes, but you knew that, like, that specific piece of information. I don't know how you knew that, but you knew it.
I've seen you get very jittery and excited. Like, you'll be like, when you first start and you're like very calm and like, oh, I see this person, and you're like describing like, my grandmother or somebody else's grandmother, and you're all nice and calm. There's been a couple times where all of a sudden you're like, and you, and this, and I'm going to tell you all of these things very quickly, and you're going to have to pay attention. I do enjoy the jittery, crazy.
And there's even been times when I'm doing readings where they'll hit me with a packet, they'll wait for me to unpackage it, and just as I'm on the last bit, hit me with another one, and then I unpackage that, and then you get into a flow state where point A to point B to point C, I didn't know where it was going, but it forms a fully aha, eureka moment. I'm just a conduit. I'm just expressing it into the world. The muse, I don't know, the inspiration, the spirit is what's moving me, is what's providing the healing. It just comes through me because I want to be honest with the energy. I want to be in harmony with it so I don't get it wrong, so everything comes through correctly. It's like unpacking that poem. I become the poem, and I become the person in spirit, and then this little bam, this thing comes out, and that's the thing that the person that I was reading for needed to hear. And it's, ends up being like in their tone or in their voice. That's kind of different than a clairvoyant psychic that I think sees visions, or they get symbols and they have to translate what that symbol means. It's like a muse for me. It's an energy, and I'm translating it out the energy. That's what it feels like.
You're a musician. I mean, I think like a true artist, right? Like the best work out there. It's kind of like you just put it out there and then it's done because you did the thing and that was the act. Like when you're in the flow, it comes through you and you do just kind of like, you're like, okay, I did my job, bye. And you don't retain any of it really. And everyone kind of takes it and makes it their own.
The thing is, the nightmares that I had experienced at the Paulsboro house pretty much continued. I guess you could say they changed, they evolved, now I was getting sleep paralysis. It wasn't like the same kind of like oppressive, like I try to capture my soul, epic battles that I was feeling in Paulsboro. But it was still very disturbed sleep for me. What I had discovered was when I would go into these episodes of sleep paralysis, and finally be able to wake myself up, that the room had like a weird tingly air to it, and I knew that if I stayed there, I was so kind of heavy with sleep that I would fall back into the sleep within seconds and have another episode of paralysis, and it would continue to happen. What I found was I actually had to force myself to get out of bed. It's like 3 a.m. I got the pins and needles feeling. I just had a sleep paralysis. I'm awake and I'm falling back asleep. And I had to, throw the blankets aside, throw my legs over, get up, get out of that room, walk down the hall with my whole body tingling, get down to the living room, turn on all the lights, put on the television, and watch TV for 1 hour. That was my prescription that I figured out in order to get back to sleep without any episodes. I needed 1 hour. That was about the time it took to reprogram my subconscious with whatever, late night HBO movies or infomercials, PBS documentaries, whatever was on at the time, just reprogram my head so that when I fell back asleep, I wasn't going back into the paralysis state. And that worked, So there was many nights where my dad would come down to the living room early in the morning and find me asleep there. So those nightmares continued. They just evolved,
He died from an overdose, and I mean, nobody even knew he was doing drugs. So it just came out of nowhere for us. And I just always envisioned that it was, he just faded off and, it was peaceful. And then I wound up watching something on the news, and it was like this 20-year-old that had been taken into custody and was in the jail cell, and he was overdosing, and the kid was convulsing and ODing for about 45 minutes before he actually died in the cell. And I never saw somebody overdose before on film and see that it could look so violent. And I started questioning, maybe his death wasn't that peaceful. So I never really shared that. It just put a very dark doubt in my head. And then probably 2 months later, I'm at your reading, and you just go by and you just give me this look and you go, I don't know, you're questioning how he passed. He wants you to know it was really peaceful. I'd never doubted what his passing would be like until then, and that was the one reading that came up in. So that was really cool.
My son had passed away before that, and we were here, and he came, and his girlfriend was here. So that was really good. One of my really good friends was here, and him and her had a really good relationship. Like, my kids call my friend's aunt. So we had gone to Disney the previous April, and he said something to her about that trip, and she lost it, because it was very important to her. I think because he lived through my issues with losing my mom, I think when we lost him, I don't think he wants anybody to be upset. Like, we were crying, but it was more like happy.
So getting back into those high school years, I kind of took to wearing, funky socks. Loved Argyle socks, loved patterned socks. At least that showed some of my eccentric side, Finding those dress down days increasingly became an opportunity to express my individuality. Something else was happening in the early 90s. I don't know if you were around then or not, but it was the kind of rebirth of the punk rock scene. It went away for a while, and it kind of had this resurgence that ended up giving birth to grunge and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that stuff. But it was like a burst of creative music, a whole genre of counterculture that came back up. So I had to go to South Street over in Philly, where all the punk rockers and counterculture people hung out, go over to Zipperhead, and that was this punk rock store, and I got some Manic Panic hair dye, and I dyed my hair bright red. It was Pillar Box Red was the name of it. And I showed up at school with this bright red hair. It was a week before graduation or whatever. And the principal called me in the office, and he's like, "What have you done? Can't let you graduate. Can't let you be seen in public. You can't look like that." We come to this agreement that I gotta take out the red. So I'm like, all right. So I can bleach it out, I can dye it brown, I can get out the red, and I was able to walk for graduation with this ungodly orange-brown hair that's sort of natural, I guess. At least it wasn't bright red, but, So I was already kind of into breaking away, I got an apartment in Wildwood that summer, so, I ended up finding some punk rock friends and going that route, going to all the music shows and dyeing my hair colors and getting the nose ring. And I kind of found my tribe, at least during the summers,
I've moved from San Diego, and my childhood was very colorful. I had the hippie mom and a lot of stuff that people don't really know that side of my youth. I've kind of got this panic, like, oh shit, my here comes my past, because you said, oh man, this guy's he's rough, and he's like, and you described him right out as ZZ Top, and I knew exactly who you were talking about. You're showing the big beer belly and the long beard, and you'd said not a very clean group, but you're like, these are really good people, and I'm kind of like, okay, But then you started screaming something about football. I can't even remember what the team was, but you were so animated with it. So I went to my mom because that was her boyfriend Chuck of many years, and she's just like, oh my God, that was his favorite team. And don't you remember he used to sit there and scream at the TV, so I really knew that was Chuck.
You were talking to my mother, and you said, you have a cousin that's deceased. And my mother said, no, I don't. And you said, no, this is for you. This is your cousin, and he's deceased. And my mom's like, no, I don't. And then you had this moment, you're like, he just said, this is Rich and I'm dead. And then my mom's family friend says, Susan, your cousin Rich. Now why this is important is because my mom has a cousin who disappeared. He was never found. So according to you, he's been murdered and he's out in the marsh somewhere.
At some point, I had picked up this book, How to Meditate. This guy was bringing transcendental meditation to the Western culture and breaking it down in ways that were kind of easy for our minds to discern. Practices about getting around missteps and failures, and how to, get to that place of enlightenment or transcendence. The book would teach how to count your breaths as a way to give your mind something to focus on. It helped me get to sleep. It helped me program my brain to get out of that anxiety that may have been producing some of the paralysis or some of the nightmares. So, even when I woke up, feeling presences in the room, I would go back to all right, instead of praying the rosary, instead of praying the Our Father, I still did that too, but I'm now going to include this breath work thing. I'm going to count my breathing. I'm going to do that. And there's that dark presence. 2, it's probably still staring at me. 3, and just keep counting my breathing. And it allows me to get to a relaxed state of mind, right? Ultimately, it should just be about watching your breathing and just kind of sitting there in a relaxed state as you're breathing. That's really hard to do. It's nearly impossible. And I think for years, trying to do these meditations, when my thinking would kind of impede the progress and I would jump back in, they call it the monkey brain, the wild horse, your mind kind of untamed will just run around. I thought, well, then I must be failing at meditation because my mind is too active. I can't shut it off. Well, nobody can shut it off, right? That shouldn't even be the primary goal. Look, if you can get to that point where you have no thought, great. It's probably going to take years of practice if you ever get there. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have successes and goals to reach before that point. So I like the idea of not switching off your mind, but turning down the volume of your thoughts. And what that means to me is you're always going to have thoughts in there, but what does it mean like volume? As if your thoughts could get louder or quieter? I don't even know if that's really a good analogy. It's almost like saying your thoughts can grab you more strongly or less strongly, right? Louder or quieter, strong or weak, the thoughts are still there. So if you turn down the volume of your thoughts, what you're trying to say is, my thoughts are still there. I'm just not grabbing onto them with my awareness. I'm not, inhabiting them and letting them become me and take hold of me. I'm going to try to be the awareness, the observer within that watches the thoughts come and watches them go. And that's what this book, How to Meditate, taught. It was saying you can start counting your breathing. Just count to a natural number, whatever you feel good with. I did 8. So I counted to 8, and then after the number 8, I would start over again at 1. And each time I breathed in, it would be another number, and I would just keep going that way. And when my thoughts would come in, I would watch them, but I don't want to lose count, so I would just bring back to the count. And if I did lose count, I would just start over at 1. The whole point is to not get ruffled, and then in getting yourself ruffled, you're tensing up, you're snapping back to the kind of consciousness that your personality is, that worldly consciousness. You're losing touch with the inner observer and the infinite awareness, and then, the meditation is failing, So it's not about failure if your thoughts don't stop entirely. The failure is by abandoning it, by giving up on it. It's shifting your awareness, saying, the thoughts are there, they're always going to be there, and I'm just going to try to challenge myself to stay in this calm place. I'm going to try and count my breathing again. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try again. And I did that for years. Breath work in itself is kind of one of the more difficult forms of meditation for us to get into. I've found that it's always a little bit easier to start out if you give your mind something to chew on, you know? It's like taming that wild horse, and you just want to close your eyes at the gate and think the horse is going to be tamed, or you can show up with a carrot and be like, here, chew on this, horse, and try and tame it. So there's different things for your mind to chew on in meditation. One of them was that technique of counting breathing. I don't think it was quite enough for me, and I kind of moved on from there to this concept of using mantras. And a mantra is something that you just repeat in your mind. It doesn't even really have to have meaning in and of itself, although some people find that using a mantra or a word or a phrase that has spiritual meaning can be helpful. But you don't want to get fixated on those words or phrases. It's just something for your mind to chew on, So instead of counting to 8, I could just say 1. And by saying 1 over and over again, I'm reinforcing not just the number, so it's like the count, but I'm adding on another layer for my mind to chew on, the concept of oneness. That every breath is one, that I am one with the breath, that I am one spirit, that we are one God, that we are one earth, that it's all one. So I would do that, but the challenge is, you can kind of get out into some philosophical headwaters there where you're not just doing the breathing anymore and your thoughts are drifting. And the next thing you know, you wake up and it's morning and you're like, oh, I fell asleep. That happened all the time, which is why even today I'm like, if you're getting into meditation, don't do it when you're laying down at night. I mean, unless, like me, you were looking for meditation to help you get better sleep. That's totally good. That really does work. But if you were looking for transcendental states of awareness, how deep can you get with enlightenment? Then you're going to need to kind of sit upright and have a posture that you won't fall asleep with,
When we did that meditation experience with you, it was like a 4-week thing we did. That was also a life-changing experience for me. And as much as in the past I've tried to meditate, and I have off and on, but that kind of secured it. Yeah, this works. And now I do mindful meditation every day. Everyone I work with, and right now I have 30, 40, 52 clients, I introduce them to meditation, every single one of them. And some of them it clicks and they do it. Some of them it doesn't, but I think it will in the future. And I don't think I would have been as confident in it if I hadn't had that experience with you.
So it was a group of 5 people, and we went into the meditation, and you walked us through kind of the gate where it was this big kind of tower place, but I was extremely conscious. I was conscious of the people around me. I was aware. I could kind of come in and out of the meditation. In all, it was, I think I saw 3 different lives. And at the end, I was able to figure out how they related into my life now. And that's what kind of solidified it for me, was that it was unique to me. And other people's experiences were unique to them. And when we got to share it, it definitely just made it sink in.
I just remember you were leading through to calm everybody and to get you picturing through your mind. You were going through colors and I think fruit. At a certain point, as you're doing this meditation, a hummingbird started leading the way through this forest. And I'm following this hummingbird. And so I go up into the temple and I go inside, and inside this Mayan temple is all the things that I hold dear. And I walk down into the temple and I was kind of happy and sad because some of those things that I hold dear, I no longer have. It was very emotional for a lot of things because it was looking at what in the temple, what do I truly hold dear? And it was spot on. And there were some things that I could look in that temple and say, I don't have those things right now and I miss them. And it made me channel, like, how can I get that part of me back?
Right after high school, I went to St. Peter's College in Jersey City. They had given me like a scholarship, and it was like a last resort college. I'm like, well, I guess we'll go there. But there was this teacher there, professor named Father Kennedy, and he taught Japanese. I took that class. That was cool. I ended up going to Japan even when my mom was in the Air Force. I used a little bit of the Japanese that Father Kennedy taught me. But he also taught a class on world religions, and I had to take it, Father Kennedy was cool, man. I liked that guy, Jesuit priest. Turns out he would open his class there on world religion by getting all of the chairs into a circle, and then he would sit up himself in this chair. Everybody would be talking, it's like not 9:05 yet. It's not time for the class. It's 9:03. We're all coming in and talking. He would sit there, close his eyes, put his feet on the ground, have a nice solid posture, rigid, straight back, put his hands on his knees there, and just start breathing. And you could see him breathing, and you could even hear him. He was doing this gentle, it was his version of a mantra, Come to find out, it's sort of like an om. Saying om is a mantra in and of itself, which I can get into later. And I think I will get into that later. But by the end of like his fifth or sixth breath, everyone in class was quiet. His vibe, his aura, his spirit permeated the room. His posture, his meditation, his calm, his breathing, it set the air in the room to his desired outcome. We're here to be serious, to learn, to be calm, to be insightful. Let's begin the class. And he did that all the time. Turns out Father Kennedy also taught Buddhist meditation at NYU. So that guy, he knew his stuff, But I took that from him, that the posture is important. And I kind of, used his mentorship in that to help guide my own meditation practice.
We did a phone one, but because after the fact, you told me, hey, everything I told you, just disregard it. I have like a really kind of funky thing happening with me right now, like a bad spirit that I just need to like shake off, or it was something like that. But you like went on this parallel path that was like super cosmic. Like you were talking about my energy had been like going around the universe, like collecting things. I was totally into it because it was so crazy. And maybe at that time you were maybe feeling insecure about like talking about that kind of stuff. And you were like, just disregard it. Like for me, it was, I didn't have an uncomfortable or bad experience because of it.
So that summer after high school, when I was in Wildwood, working up on the boardwalk at the amusement pier and all that, having a good time. Once that summer ended, I went to St. Peter's College. And it was shocking moving up it's right across from New York City. You could see the Twin Towers from my dormitory window. That summer was actually the summer of the first World Trade bombing, the one where they had the van down in the parking garage. It was a crazy culture shock. Instead of now asking what music do you like to meet new friends, these people were asking like, what was your ethnic background? Where's your parents from? That was their kind of conversational starter to get things going. They didn't care what music you listened to. I'm like, man, it's so weird. And I had long hair, and I was all tanned. And here I am coming to the city. It is just a weird, weird transition. I liked it. I liked going over into New York, and you take the PATH train for $1. And I remember coming up the first time from the subway like, wow, I'm alone in New York City. This is crazy, and buy my Dead Kennedys CD at Bleecker Bob's. And it was cool, man. But the actual experience at the college after a semester, I was kind of done with it. My heart wasn't into it. I didn't like the city that much. People say, you should live in a city for like a year, but don't live too much longer than that where you become jaded. I get it, So I ended up Thanksgiving break coming back down to Salem County, back to my dad's house. And before going back up to finish out the semester, I came to the decision like, I'm not going to go back there for the spring semester. So I went over to University of Delaware. It's like a half an hour drive from my dad's house right across the bridge in Delaware, and ended up signing up for spring semester there. So by the time I started that up, University of Delaware, that whole counterculture thing was like, I had to rebel, It was like, it's going to sound silly, but it was like 16,000, white kids, the whole college campus. It's like no diversity whatsoever, and it freaked me the freak out, man. Like, I was like, nose ring, dyed hair. I started doing eyeliner and nail polish, and I'd get my thrift store boots and my Kmart pants that I'd rip them all up, and I was like punk rock, man. And eventually, like halfway through that semester, I just decided I was done with that, and I kind of like just had my hair normal thing, normal length, normal color, had some normal clothes, and I was standing at the bus stop. See, it was a big campus, so you could take this inter-campus bus, and I was waiting to go to the next class across campus, and I was like, I feel friggin' invisible. I feel invisible right now, and I realized why. I don't look like this counterculture punk rocker. Now I look like literally everybody else on this campus. And it was so deeply distasteful to me that I'm like, I'm dropping out. I'm dropping out. I can't stay at this college. It's just so suburban, white conformity. And it was not what I was about. And I just rebelled against that, I guess. I just couldn't do it, man. And so I dropped out, My friend from high school, Bill, he had gone up to Rutgers, and he had ended up dropping out too. So we ended up getting an apartment together. And, in college, you're used to sharing a bedroom. That's what you do. Like, they just stack those dorms with people, So when we went apartment shopping, I was like, it'd be nice to get a 2-bedroom. But, I mean, if we have to share a bedroom, if it's like cheaper, then let's just do it. Are you okay with it? And he's like, absolutely. I don't care. We're like used to it, But even though we shared that bedroom, or, beds were on opposite sides of the room, I was starting to get these crazy, experiences still. And Bill on the other side, he's sleeping through the night. I'm like, all right, I guess it's all in my head, having these like crazy spirits in my head and disturbed sleep, like, still happening.
I feel closer to him now than I ever did when he was alive. I had never in my life ever sought to communicate with anybody who had passed. I was scared. I was like, what is happening? I'm crazy. This is nuts. And I was only talking to my best friend. But then, as I was starting to be like, no, man, like this shit is real. I was like talking to my dad and talking to my daughter, and like, my daughter's so open to everything now, and and it makes me feel better as her mother that like if I hope I go before her, but if I do, she's going to know to look for me. She's going to know that she'll be able to feel me. It's amazing. It's freedom. It's freedom in this life, and it's freedom of just what is waiting on the other side.
The very first thing was my mother. So her coming through and you being able to explain what she was saying and, what she was feeling and what was going on was so unique to her experience, that I thought, he's not making this up. He didn't talk to people in my family and get this information. This is real, because no one would know these things except for my mother. Now I am open to understanding and accepting that there's other channels to communicate. Being open has broadened my perspective of life and death. It's shaped me in my counseling. I have a new dimension. As a counselor, I know all my theories. I got all that. I know what the textbook says, but now I know there's something else that maybe I should consider. And that's why I think I have tears when I talk about it, because it truly was life-changing.
And one of the things we got to get into in this episode, I mean, my God, visitation dreams. How did I forget about this? This is the most important, profound thing. When someone in spirit visits you in the dream state, it produces this kind of pre-lucidity. You become aware. I say pre-lucidity because they say truly lucid dreaming is like, oh, I'm dreaming. Well, I don't want to be dreaming this. I want to go fly a unicorn and like go over Mount Everest, and you have total control. Well, pre-lucidity means that you don't control the content of the dream. You're still having the same type of dream, but you become aware that you're dreaming, right? So you're not totally aware where you're like, oh, I don't want this dream to be about taking a test in school. I want it to be about this. That's total lucidity. But pre-lucidity is like there's this vision, you know? I'm like in the dream and this seems real, and there's my grandmother sitting over in the living room, and this doesn't feel like a regular dream. And now that I'm seeing her, I'm realizing that it is her, and she's sitting there playing solitaire, because that's what she did. She was like a card shark. Her and her sisters would always play cards. She's still playing cards, you know? It's like she would watch the Wheel of Fortune when she was living, and now in the afterlife, she's visiting me in the dream state. She's sitting in that living room of the Paulsboro house, and she's watching Wheel of Fortune still. And these dreams would happen, like not every night, but frequent enough that I got used to it. And I'm like, that is my grandmother, you know? And there's like an emotional punch. Like, it's not a regular dream. You feel like that's really her. Your heart and your soul responds, and it leaps up, and you can feel this emotional wave, you know? And every one of those dreams that I'd have with my grandmother, you know, she'd just be going about the day, and I'd start to interact with her more and more. Sometimes the dream went on all night, but it would always end when I started to talk to her and try to figure it out. And the more I had the dreams, the more I was able to like stick into that state of lucidity and start to converse with her. And I would say, how'd you get out of the hospital? Like they told me you were dead, and I'm like confused. And then she'd be confused, and then I'd wake up, and I'm like, what the hell was that? You know, there was times where I'd wake up sobbing. I'd wake up crying uncontrollably because it was really her, and I could feel it. I remember there being one dream where I got to the point where I'm asking her, like, didn't you have this thing happen? Didn't you die? And, you know, usually I'd wake up because, like, she just couldn't address that she was dead. In the dream, she's still alive. She's still going through the motions. I remember being up in my bedroom there in the Paulsboro house, and she was standing there, and she was looking at some of the books that I was reading because, you know, I was like an avid book nerd at the time. And I was like, Grandma, what year is it? And she was like, oh, it's 1988 and it's 1994. And I was like, how can it be both? And then I woke up. So I'm still having these experiences and these visitation dreams, you know, while I'm living in that apartment with Bill. And it was like I was working at this bookstore, and I wasn't really going too many places in life, you know. I didn't have much of a plan. It was right in that space of time, one of those dreams, I woke up from, it shook me awake. It was early morning, and I was like, that was Grandma. I have to go back to University of Delaware. Oh my God. It was this compulsion. And I actually drove to the campus that day, and here it was the last day of signups. And I signed up, and I got back in that fall semester. You know, I'd skipped one semester, but I got in just in time to register for the upcoming fall semester, went back to University of Delaware. It's like my grandmother was really laying on thick with that one, and she got me to do it. Well, I had this one where she was in her back bedroom, and she was never back there in any of those dreams that I ever had. Now she's in her bedroom in the house, and she said, pray for me. And it shook me awake. And I remember going to my Aunt Madge and telling her about the dream and telling everyone in the family, Grandmom says pray for her. Grandmom says pray for her. And so I think everybody must have prayed for her, and it helped because it was like a week later, I had a dream that she was standing up on the stairs. I was down on the first floor looking up the stairs, and she was like, I'm going up now. And I was like, oh, like this is the last time I'll see you? And she was like, yeah, you're old enough now, and You're at your father's. He's got his feet on the ground. He could take care of you. I'll look in on you. And she had like all my childhood toys arranged. Everything was totally organized and set up. And then before she left, she said, if you ever want to talk to me again, wear extra blankets. And then I woke up. And the crazy thing about this is some people would say sleep paralysis is a completely neurological condition that's brought on by some imbalance of neurochemistry in your brain. And some people would say it's like the temperature that you sleep at. If it's really cold, it helps with sleep paralysis. And I found that when I do wear extra blankets or it's extra hot or stuffy, that it could bring on a paralysis episode. So there is a neurological component to it. But for me, I would always wake up and see spirits, and they say, well, that's part of the paralysis umbrella, hypnagogic hallucinations. That's all explained that way. But it's weird because my grandma was like, wear extra blankets. And I tried it, I tried it months later. I needed to talk to grandma. All right, I'm going to put on extra blankets tonight. And she was there. Now, I'm not saying this is going to work for everybody. She knew how to get to me, and she knew when it would work, and she knew when I'd have the idea. And she said that, and damned if it didn't work, But the visitations were always brief after that. They were never those all night long, her lingering and hanging out type things. My grandmother has been a continual guide throughout my life. I feel her presence within me. I feel her presence around me. She died in 1988. I mean, that's a long time. I can still feel her around. And it's always funny. It's like she guides me in ways that have to do with my relationships, my career, physical things, like the shoulds, because that's the kind of person she was in life. She wasn't like a new agey person in life. She was, Catholic and stern, and you did what you did, and there was like rules and obligations. So she kind of steers me in that respect. And there's been some times where it's a tug of war in my mind where I'm like, I want to be a medium. And she's like, why don't you go for this job instead? And I've had to kind of go to a higher place where I'm like, my grandmother is there. I appreciate the love and the support. But when I go to this higher place, I can feel this other level of guidance that did not know me in this lifetime, that are like some other soul family of mine that are guiding me along this extra mission, this other thing. So I like my grandmom in my life for things like, material guidance and support. But when it comes to like the grand mission, I think I'm here to like break the family karma. Like, I guess they say the years of suffering are there to kind of make you more spiritual. And it definitely set me on this path of mediumship. But I don't know if I would trust my grandmother to like guide through all of the guardian angels and the spirit guidance to do a mediumship reading. But she's good at what she does, and it took me a while to learn who to get guidance from. Don't just listen to everybody in spirit. Otherwise, you're liable to pick up the drinkers at the bar, and next thing you know, you're ordering a scotch when you don't drink scotch, and what is happening? So... funny story there. We'll get into that later. Drunk readings. Don't do them. Anyway, this brings us to the end of episode 4. I'm glad that you joined me on this little journey. And stay tuned. Next week, episode 5, we're going to dive into a lot more new agey things. Boy, do I get into some crazy stuff. We're going weird next time. It's going to be fun. So check it out. There's more information on the website at rippleroadpod.com, and that's rippleroadpod.com. You can also check me out personally at my website at scottedwardhenry.com, and that's Scott with 1 T. Follow on Facebook, Instagram. Can you like and subscribe to a podcast? I guess you can. Sure. Subscribe to the podcast for updates. I'm probably going to be uploading it once a week, so you'll get little notifications when the next one comes up. How about that? That'll be fun. Stay cool out there, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks again.